Once upon a time, in a small village, there was a lovely little girl who was known as Little Red Riding Hood because she always wore a red hooded cloak that her grandmother had knitted for her. Everyone in the village called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to visit her grandmother, who lived deep in the forest. Her mother said, "Dear, take this basket of bread and wine to your grandmother. She is sick and needs good food." Little Red Riding Hood took the basket filled with bread and wine and started her journey into the forest. Before she left, her mother warned, "Remember, dear, don't talk to strangers, and go straight to your grandmother's house." On her way, Little Red Riding Hood met a wolf. The wolf asked, "Little Red Riding Hood, where are you going?" Little Red Riding Hood, without any fear, replied, "I am going to visit my grandmother who lives deep in the forest." The wolf thought up a cunning plan. He said, "Well, Little Red Riding Hood, look at all the beautiful flowers around. They will make your grandmother very happy." Little Red Riding Hood believed the wolf and started picking flowers. Meanwhile, the wolf hurried to the grandmother's house. He knocked on the door and said, "Grandmother, it's Little Red Riding Hood. I have brought you some bread and wine." The grandmother, who was sick and lying in bed, answered, "Come in, dear." The wolf rushed in and swallowed the grandmother whole. Then, he put on the grandmother's clothes and lay in bed, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. Not long after, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house. When she saw the wolf lying in bed, she felt surprised but thought it was because her grandmother was very sick. She asked, "Grandmother, why is your nose so big?" The wolf replied, "So I can smell you better, dear." Little Red Riding Hood continued, "Why are your eyes so big, grandmother?" The wolf answered, "So I can see you better, dear." Finally, Little Red Riding Hood asked, "Why are your teeth so big and sharp, grandmother?" The wolf responded menacingly, "So I can eat you better." Then the wolf jumped up and swallowed Little Red Riding Hood whole. Fortunately, a huntsman was passing by at that moment. He heard the cries of Little Red Riding Hood and rushed in to help. He opened the door and saw the wolf sleeping after his meal. The huntsman then used a knife to cut open the wolf's stomach and saved Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother. Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother thanked the huntsman for saving their lives. They learned the lesson not to talk to strangers. From that day on, Little Red Riding Hood followed her mother's instructions carefully, and she and her grandmother lived happily ever after.